الدقة على إيش؟ yeah. في الرواية خلي رواية الآن، بس أنا أقول يعني بصفة عام كيف أعرف بأن هذا عالم وهذا عمي؟ And how he pronounces things? His word choice? Possibly. This is related to رواية بالمعنى. No, تفضل. His actions, right? His actions are very telling. If this person, if I see him praying, if I see him fasting, he's breaking fast with other Muslims, what does this tell me? It tells me he's Muslim, right? That which is very important. There's certain things that he does, right? How he deals with people, that gives me a good idea. Also the things he talks about. No, تفضل يا سيد. Credentials. Okay. So who he learned from. I agree. Who he learned from, what institution he went to. All of these things are very important ways for me to give this person credence. Is this person qualified or not? Qualifications. Also, when a person speaks, what are some things I should look for? Right, I should look for knowledge for sure, but that knowledge, when I'm taking it or when he's giving it, what are some things that I should be taking away from that? What should happen? Should I feel that if this person is breaking people into categories, or if this person is bringing people together, which way is more prophetic? Bringing the people together. There's no doubt. But if I have somebody who's sitting and saying, okay, well, he's from this hizb, and he's from this party, and he's from this group, and he's from this, is this a prophetic way of calling people to Islam? No, it's not. So we have some criteria here. Now, is there like a checklist that we can go through to determine if this person is a person of knowledge? Or is it just all of these things together? Right, it's all of these things together. It's very abstract, right? There's no grading list. Okay, this person is, I give him a 76, therefore هذا من أهل العلم, right? Like he's from a person of knowledge. But some of these abstract ideas, they come into play when we deal with the rawat. Because even with them, they say that the person we take from is when his correct is more than his mistakes. So do they sit there and count the mistakes? Do they sit there and count? No, you can't. This is not something that is really tangible or something that's really possible. This is just a general scale that is given to help bring an understanding of who this person was and how to take from him. تفضل. Why they used to? No, he not in his muqaddimah, he doesn't. But there are a few reasons, right? Some of the reasons, why would somebody who fabricates, why does he fabricate? Either for a position in the sultan, right, politically, that people have political reasons for taking it. People have religious reasons, right? So if they're from a particular firqa, if they're from a particular sect or a particular hizb, what is he going to want to do? Yansur madhabu, right? He's going to want to say something to promote his madhab. Why else? Maybe financial reasons, which is not as much, right? Which is not as much because there's not a lot of financial benefit in the hadith. But politically and religiously, these are the two main reasons that people actually used to do wada. Imam Muslim doesn't mention it here. Yeah. The ulama jar wa ta'dil. The scholars. No. I'm talking when we talk about narrators, when we talk about rawat, ulama jar wa ta'dil. Now, as for everyone else, you can determine. Yes, this person has knowledge, this person doesn't. You don't have to, because you're not judging his knowledge. Fi farq. If someone asks me to sit with a scholar, if I have less knowledge than him, can I say he's knowledgeable or not? Yes. Can I say how much knowledge he has? No. That's the difference. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us all the ability to determine between what? What is knowledgeable and what is ignorance. I don't need to be more knowledgeable than him. I only need to be more knowledgeable than him to tell me how much knowledge this person has. But we're not here to judge that. And people use different things to judge knowledge, right? So I remember that one of them said, how do you determine how knowledgeable someone is? Well, how much hadith do you have memorized? Is that a sign of knowledge? No, it's a sign of hifz, wa hiba, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given this person. But it's not a sign of knowledge. It's a sign of his interest. Because sometimes people have weak memory, but they spend time to memorize. So either it can be a sign of his hifz, or it can be a sign of his himma, right? The effort that he's exerted and that he's put forward. But knowledge is an abstract thing. It's not something that is, it's not a measurable thing that this person, even if I have somebody less knowledgeable than me. For example, a father and his son is 8 years old. 8-year-old has less knowledge than his father, correct? Can you tell me how much knowledge he has? Can I say he has about 17 or 24 knowledge? No, it's abstract, right? It's not something that you can actually sit and measure with, like, we can't take his brain and be like, okay, it's about 7 ounces of knowledge in his head. So some of these abstract things, so this idea of how much, we only know how much, and even Imam Muslim, how does he help us gauge knowledge and knowledgeable people? What does he do? He compares. He compares. He says that this person is not as knowledgeable as that person. He says that no one is like this person in knowledge. Why? Because it's abstract. You don't have numbers that you can put next to these people. So this comparison, it helps give us an idea on how we actually grade people and how we deal with scholars and how we deal with narrators. Now. Yeah. Mm-hmm. صح. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure. So even the Prophet ﷺ, if he said, when he's talking about knowledge and he's talking about these things, there's a very famous hadith. He says, whenever Allah intends good for someone, what does he give them? Fiqh. يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. He gives them what? What does fiqh mean? Understanding. Right? He gives him understanding of the religion. Did the Prophet ﷺ say that he makes him memorize more? No. Is memorization important? Yes, it is. There's no doubt. It's a tool. And when you memorize something, so if you memorize the Quran, what is the advantage? You have the Quran in one instance. You guys understand? Are you following me? You have the Quran in one instance, meaning that the Quran is available to you at a moment. Any word, any ayah, any use, any surah. It's available to you in a moment, in an instance. That is the benefit of memorizing. And I can superimpose all of the different verses. If I'm looking for a particular pattern, if I'm looking for a particular theme, I have the ability now to gather all of these verses in one instant. The same thing with the hadith. The more hadith that I have, the more hadith I can superimpose and gather in an instant. And this is the same thing the muhaddithin did. Remember, Imam Muslim, he chose from how many hadith? 300,000. And in order to have 300,000 hadith available to him, and in many countries you have, like in Mauritania, it's not uncommon to memorize books. Why? They would memorize like books like crazy. Why? It's not just paper not being, it's expensive. It costs money to buy books. It's cheaper to what? It's cheaper to memorize. Honestly, it's cheaper to memorize. Because memorizing is what? How much does it cost to memorize? It's free. It's free 99, right? And the only thing it costs you is time. You're right. No, and that's the thing, right? If you don't have other distractions, when we think, sometimes we think of the companions, we think about the Arabs of old, we say, well, they memorized all these things. Why? Because they had time. They didn't have as many distractions as we have today. And not just that, it was a skill that was important to them. It's something that they constantly trained. So he mentions examples. And the reason he mentions examples is to help us understand what these individuals were and how we compare them to others. Because this is the only way to gauge. The only way to gauge is to be like, because we can't put numbers on top of them. We can't say, okay, he's scholar level 72 and this one's, 65. So what does he do? He groups them and he says, okay, well, this one's more knowledgeable than this one. And this one is less knowledgeable than this one. Because when you have that comparison, it helps give you a general scale of who these individuals were and what they narrated. And then he goes on to say, لأن حكم أهل العلم والذي نعرفه من مذهبهم في قبول ما يتفرد به المحدث من الحديث أن يكونوا قد شارك الثقات من أهل العلم والحفظ في بعض ما رووا أمعن في ذلك على الموافقة لهم فإذا وجد كذلك ثم زاد بعد ذلك شيئا ليس عند أصحابه قبلت زيادته. So over here he mentions another very important term. He mentions the term ziyada. And ziyada, what does that mean to us in Arabic? It means what? Extra. It means in addition. So over here, a munkar or something that is munkar can be also in addition. And over here he's saying that, okay, sometimes you have narrations where you have this extra piece of information. How do you deal with it? Because this is important. And he'll talk about when he deals with it. But what I want to talk about here first is that this idea of tafarrud. This idea of tafarrud, and I think we had mentioned this in the hadith class. What is tafarrud? You guys remember? Tafarrud biddal. So when you have lone narrations. And when you have lone narrations, why is this problematic? There's nothing to compare it to. And comparison has a big role in hadith culture and the hadith scholars. When I have nothing to compare it to, how can I make a hukum? And it becomes that much more challenging. And over here, sometimes this tafarrud can be ziyada, right? It can be an additional piece of information. And he says that the way that this is done is by comparing it to the thiqat. So he says, what we know from the people of knowledge is that in the madhab of Ahl al-Hadith, that the reason that we accept these individual narrations is because we're able to compare them to other narrations that have been narrated by thiqat. But he said the problem is that when these individuals narrate and have these lone narrations, it becomes very difficult to find this muwafaqa. It becomes very difficult to find this correlation in order to help us judge those particular narrations. فإذا وجد كذلك ثم زاد بعد ذلك شيئا ليس عند أصحابه قبلت زيادته. So over here he says that, okay, even if you find a number of narrations and they run in parallel and they're all narrating the same thing, he said the problem comes when you have this extra information. How do I deal with this extra information? And why is that a potential problem or a potential issue? So for example, and Imam Muslim actually mentions this, the Prophet ﷺ, he fasted on Monday. The Prophet ﷺ 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 fasted on Monday and Thursday. How do we deal with that? How do we deal with Thursday? Right, forget the emphasis. Monday we can agree upon that it is sunnah. It's something that's narrated. But now I have this additional hadith that talks about Thursday. I just have one. This is هذا هو انفراد. MashaAllah. Yeah, we got some scholars of hadith blooming amongst our ranks. So we have this one narration. How do I deal with it? Do I accept it? Do I reject it? It depends. It depends. Right? It depends on a number of issues, inshallah, which we will definitely talk about. But at the end of the day, do you see how the science is a lot more than we sometimes take it to be? Because even these additions, who is narrating these additions that it's become problematic for us? People who we know to be what? Thiqah. We know these individuals to be trustworthy. We know them to be reliable. We know them to be precise. And now I have this extra piece of information. And now that as a scholar of hadith, I have nothing to compare it to, I am put in a very difficult position. Do I accept this ziyada or do I reject it? Because the possibility of rejecting it, what am I doing? I'm making something not a sunnah. And if I'm accepting it, I'm making something a sunnah. Either I'm rejecting something that these issues. فأما من تراه يعمد لمثل الزهري في جلالته وكثرة أصحابه الحفاظ متقنين لحديثه وحديث غيره، أو لمثل هشام بن عروة وحديثهما عند أهل العلم مبسوط مشترك قد نقل أصحابهما عنهما حديثهما على الاتفاق منهم في أكثره. فيروي عنهما أو عن أحدهما العدد من الحديث مما لا يعرفه أحد من أصحابهما وليس ممن قد شاركهم في الصحيح مما عندهم فغير جائز قبول حديث هذا الضرب من الناس والله أعلم. So he says over here, if I give the example of Imam Zuhri, well known, معروف, muhaddith, scholar, big, itqan, sahib itqan. This individual, or you have Hisham ibn Urwa, also Imam, scholar, muhaddith, narrator. These type of individuals, when they're narrating their hadith, it becomes very easy to analyze their hadith. Why? Because they have so many. They have so many students and they have so many parallel narrations. And this is why you find that there is no agreement on many, even imams, many times you won't have an agreement. You know why? Because they have so many narrations. And those individuals who are more harsh in their critique, they will focus on these few mistakes and they'll say, look at the mistakes that were done here. But when you have individuals even of this level, Imam Muslim is saying it's easy to analyze their hadith. It's easy to look at them. It's easy to figure out where these individuals stand because you have so many hadith to analyze. There's so many things for you to look at. He said to the point that if you have someone who isn't known from their students and who's narrating opposite to what they narrate, what should I do? If I have 5 of his students saying yes and I have 1 student saying no, and the no is coming from a student I don't really know, what should I do? I reject it. Right? I reject it. Why? Because it's coming from somebody who is not known. Or you'll have a lesser known student. So for example, imagine a majlis of hadith. So imagine a majlis of hadith. You have the sheikh who's sitting, he's narrating a hadith. Is it possible that all of the people who are sitting are thiqah, are trustworthy and reliable? No. It's not possible. Maybe even the sheikh himself, right? So it's not possible that everybody be trustworthy and reliable who's there. But is it possible that they're all narrating the same thing? Yes. Saying that, his best students, are they going to be known from the crowd? Absolutely. And why are they his best students? Probably because they spent the most time with him. Probably because he's the one that praised them and he actually had him do projects for him on his behalf, gather certain things for him. And when you have these close group of students, group of students, everybody else, they also see them. And they say, oh no, these are the people who, they spent a lot of time with him. But Khalid, he came once or twice, so you can't really trust his narrations because he's not from that inner circle. He's not from his well-known group of students. And if he narrates something, then you're going to have doubt with it, especially if he goes against the major students of, even with these hadith that look sound, that look correct, that look upright, he will still mention what? Some of the mistakes that are present. And this is something that is relatively unique to Imam Muslim's Ṣaḥīḥ. That if he sees an illah, if he sees a defect in the hadith, what is he going to do? He's going to mention it. He's going to mention it. And this is something that's important for us to take note of. وَبَعْدْ. Now, this was the big part of the introduction. Now he's going on and he's saying, and to proceed, يرحمك الله فلولا الذي رأينا من سوء الصنيع كثير ممن نصب نفسه محدثا فيما يلزمه من طرح الحديث الضعيفة ورواية المنكرة وتركهم الاقتصار على الحديث الصحيحة المشهورة مما نقله الثقات معروفون بالصدق والأمانة بعد معرفتهم وإقرارهم بألسنتهم أن كثيرا مما يقذفون به إلى الأغبياء من الناس هو مستنكر ومنقول عن قوم غير مرضيين ممن ذم الرواية عنهم أئمة أهل الحديث مثل مالك بن أنس وشعبة بن الحجاج وسفيان بن عيينة ويحيى بن سعيد القطان وعبد الرحمن بن مهدي وغيرهم من الأئمة لما سهل علينا الانتصاب لما سألت من التمييز والتحصيل. So over here, now he's mentioning the second reason. The first reason, he was requested. The second, he sees all these people putting these books together, and what's going on in those books? What are they gathering? They're gathering weak hadith. And he's like, what is this? What's going on? You people who are doing this, you're not supposed to be doing this. You are not specialists in this field. You should not be talking about these things. You should not be writing books in these things. So as a response to that, Imam Muslim, he says, I'm going to put this book together. And I'm only going to bring forward those narrations that are actually Ṣaḥīḥ. And he says that, and this is easy for me. Why is it easy for me? Because you have great scholars of hadith. You have great scholars of hadith like, who does he mention specifically? Malik ibn Anas and Abdurrahman ibn Mahdi. Right? These are two giants in the hadith literature who have contributed to this science. And he said they've made it easy to do this. All I have to do is look to them. I look to them and it helps me differentiate between those hadith that are accepted and those hadith that are rejected, and I can take from them, and it has allowed me to compile this book. He says, ولكن من أجل ما علمناك من نشر القوم الأخبار المنكرة بالأسانيد الضعاف المجهولة وقذفهم بها إلى العوام الذين لا يعرفون عيوبها خف عليه قلوبنا إجابتك إلى ما سألت. So he says that because of what I saw around me, it's become that much easier for me to actually fulfill what it is that you're requesting from me. Because I see that these individuals are narrating weak hadith, because I see these individuals are narrating munkar hadith, it becomes that much easier for me to write this book on Sahih because of what you have asked from me. And another thing that he mentions here, he says, بِالَسَانِيدِ الضِّعَافِ الْمَجْهُولَةِ. So we just did majhul in our last hadith class. What is majhul? Unknown. What is unknown? It's not the source. It's an unverifiable narrator. So this individual, like, so for example, so, no, this information, we don't know anything about him. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah, so like the narrator, we have no idea who it is. Like either you don't know who the narrator is or you don't know anything about them. So for example, if I see Khalid in the masjid, is Khalid a liar? No, you don't know. So I can't call him a liar, but I also can't call him what? I can't call him truthful because I don't know anything about him. And it's the same thing with majhul. It's the same thing with majhul. If I don't know, Imam Muslim, he puts this in which category? Da'af. He says that if you don't know the condition of the narrator, then the hadith is automatically rejected. So over here, this is the first time we actually come across the tabweeb. Now, tabweeb are the chapter headings, and the chapter headings are not from Imam Muslim. Imam Muslim only has kutub. So he'll have, for example, the first book is Kitab al-Iman. That is the first book he has. But all of the chapter headings that we find, they're from two sources. The first major source is Imam Nawawī. Imam Nawawī is the first major source taken from his Minhaj. The second major source is Qādī Iyyaḍ in his... he has an explanation. We just talked about it, and it totally slipped my mind. Al-Mufhim. Right, when he has an explanation of Sahih Muslim. It's an ikhtisar that he took, but he explains it. He has some chapter headings, and the rest of the chapter headings are taken from him. So over here, I'm going to read the section, and then I want you guys to tell me if you agree with Imam Muslim's chapter heading or not, and we'll do this with the rest of the book, inshallah. وَاعْلَمْ وَفَقَكَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى أَنَّ الْوَاجِبَ عَلَى كُلِّ أَحَدٍ عرف التمييز بين الصحيح الروايات وسقيمها وثقات الناقلين لها من المتهمين أن لا يروي منها إلا ما عرف صحة مخارجه وستارة في ناقله أن يتقي منها ما كان منها عن أهل التهم والمعاندين من أهل البدع. So there are a few things here that I want to talk about. The first one, he says, no, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, أن الواجب على كل أحد, that every individual needs to know the difference between sahih, acceptable narrations, وضعيفها وسقيمها, and those that are rejected. وثقات الناقلين لها من المتهمين, and know those narrators that are ثقة, that are reliable, and know those narrators that are accused of lying. أن لا يروي منها إلا ما عرف صحة مخارجه, and that they should not narrate except what is what? صحيح. والستارة في ناقله وأن يتقي منها ما كان منها عن أهل التهم والمعاندين من أهل البدع, and that these narrations need to be avoided. They need to be stayed away from. And there are two groups of people where he specifically mentions that these are avoided. He says, من أهل التهم والمعاندين من أهل البدع. He said that those individuals that have been accused and the mu'anidin, those stubborn individuals from أهل البدع. Why did he not say أهل البدع على الإطلاق? Why did he not say the people of innovation in general? He himself narrates from Ahl Bid'ah, right? There are some innovators that he himself narrates from, and some of them are Qadri, some of them Jahmi, some of them Shi'i, some of them Ibadi. So when he says Mu'anidin, when he says those stubborn individuals, he's comparing what other category did he combine at-tuham with previously? He said those individuals who were accused and the liars. So when he says here wal mu'anidin min ahl bid'ah, who can we associate them with? The wadda'i, that those individuals who are fabricating. And how do we know that they're mu'anid? How do we know that they're stubborn? How do we know that they prefer their madhab over these narrations? Because they're willing to what? They're willing to lie and they're willing to fabricate. And he says, وَالدَّلِيلُ أَنَّ الَّذِي قُلْنَا مِنْ هَذَا هُوَ اللَّازِمْ دُونَ مَا خَالَفَهُ قَوْلُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إن جاءكم فاسق بنبأ فتبينوا أن تصيبوا قوما بجهالة فتصبحوا على ما فعلتم نادمين وقال جل ثناؤه ممن ترضون من الشهداء وقال عز وجل وأشهدوا ذوي العدل منكم. So over here he brings a few proofs on why he can actually differentiate and why it is permissible for him to make these rulings on these particular narrators. Because some people might claim, okay, well, if you're saying that this person is a liar, or you're saying this person is a fabricator, are you not now going around accusing people? So over here he uses Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement, if a sinner comes to you with a piece of information, then you have to what? You have to verify it. So over here he himself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and here the fasiq is who? You guys know? It was one of who? It was one of the companions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wasafahu bil-ish. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes him with what? With fisq. So over here it can be anyone. It could be anyone who comes to you with a piece of information. Then you have to verify. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he also uses Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement, min man tardawna min shuhada, and take those individuals who you are pleased with as witnesses, that people who are accepted in the community, people who are looked up to, that these are the individuals who should bear witness unto these affairs. وقال عز وجل واشهدوا ذوي العدل منكم, and those individuals should witness it who are ذوي العدل, those individuals who are upright, those individuals who are righteous. فدل بما ذكرنا من هذه الآية أن خبر الفاسق ساقط غير مقبول. That, and this proves that when a fasiq narrates something, that his narrations are to be rejected. وأن شهادة غير العدل مردودة, and that if an individual gives witness and he himself is not adil, he himself is not righteous, then his witnessing is to be rejected. وخبر وإن فارق معنى الشهادة في بعض الوجوه, he says that even if narrating is different from witnessing in certain respects, in certain regards, فقد يجتمعنا في أعظم معانيهما, that these individuals, they still share a meaning and they share a facet when it comes to the greater part of this, which is actually narrating, putting forward and witnessing. إذ كان خبر الفاسق غير مقبول عند أهل العلم, and that the narration of a fasiq or a sinner is not accepted amongst the people of knowledge, كما أن شهادته مردودة عند جميعهم, as the witness of such an individual would be rejected by all of them. ودلت السنة على نفي رواية منكر من الأخبار كنحو دلالة القرآن على نفي خبر الفاسق. He says similarly, the Sunnah also points to this fact. The Sunnah also points to this fact that the narration of a fasiq or the narration that is munkar is to be rejected. And this is very much in line with what the verse that he has brought in, or what the Quran says on the subject. وَهُوَ الْأَثَرُ الْمَشْهُورُ عَنْ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. And he said, in this sunnah is taken from this athar, is taken from this narration, مَنْ حَدَّثَ عَنِّي بِحَدِيثٍ يُرَى أَنَّهُ كَذِبْ فَهُوَ أَحَدُ الْكَاذِبِينَ, that whoever narrates from me a hadith and he knows, or and it is a lie, then he is one of the two liars. Whoever narrates a hadith on me and the hadith is a lie, then he is one of the two liars. Who are the two liars? Or who is the possibility? So he's saying that either he said somebody's lying. Who? Either the narrator himself or the one that he is narrating from. So you're going to be a liar. There's a very strong possibility that you yourself are going to be a liar. And then he goes on to say, وقال حدثنا أبو بكر بن أبي شيبة قال حدثنا وكيع عن شعبة عن الحكم عن عبد الرحمن بن أبي ليلى عن سمرة بن جندب. And he's just mentioning the chain of narration for the hadith. and he does tahwil al-isnad. So he brings another isnad to talk about this, saying وحدثنا أبو بكر بن أبي شيبة أيضا قال حدثنا وكيع عن شعبة بن سفيان عن حبيب عن ميمون بن أبي شبيب عن المغيرة بن شعبة قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ذلك. So he mentions the two companions are narrating this. He says Samra ibn Junnab and Mughira ibn Shu'bah, and then he brings the chains of narrations going back to this hadith about the one who narrates on the Prophet ﷺ and it is a lie, then he is one of the two liars. So over here, Imam al-Nawawī, he titles this saying, Bab wujub riwaya an al-thiqat wa tark al-kadhabin, that the obligation of narrating on upright, thiqa individuals and leaving off the liars. What do you guys think about that chapter heading? You think it's appropriate for what he spoke about here? Yeah, he says, Bab wujub riwaya an al-thiqat, the obligation of narrating on those who are thiqa and trustworthy, wa tark al-kadhabin, and the obligation of leaving off the narration of those who are liars. I don't think it's bad. I think it's okay. I would have preferred yani bab wujub at-tamyiz bain as-sahih was-saqim. That would have been my preference. That how he said the obligation of learning how to differentiate between what is an accepted and a rejected narration. Because does everybody need to be the highest level of thiqa to take their narration? No, they don't. لعله يريد يعني من that like a spectrum from that. والله أعلم. It could be Hassan, yeah. But wallahu alam, maybe from thiqa he just means maqbul, he means accepted. But the meaning comes across. وحدثنا أبو بكر بن أبي شيبة قال حدثنا غندر عن شعبة تحويل الإسناد وحدثنا محمد بن المثنى وابن بشار قال حدثنا محمد بن جعفر قال حدثنا شعبة عن منصور عن ربيع بن حراش أنه سمع عليا رضي الله عنه يخطب قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يكذب علي فإنه من يكذب عليه يلج النار, that do not lie upon me, so whoever lies upon me then he will burn in the fire. And this is a narration from Ali. What's interesting, and this is a faida hadithiyya for those of you who are interested, in the first narration he mentions Gundar narrating on Shu'bah and he says an. In the second narration he says Ibn Bashar Muhammad ibn Ja'far حدثنا Shu'bah. So in the first narration there's no tasrih bis sama', and he does an'ana. He said in Gundar he was known to be mudallis, so you have Gundar and Shu'bah, and in the second narration you have Ibn Bashar. Ibn Bashar is Muhammad ibn Bashar Gundar, so it's the same person. So he mentions here that one is with a wasta, one is with a individual who is between him and Muhammad ibn Muthanna. Between him and Shu'bah. And the second one he mentions that he narrates from Shu'bah directly. وحدثني زهير بن حرب قال حدثنا إسماعيل ابن عليا عن عبد العزيز بن صهيب عن أنس بن مالك رضي الله عنه أنه قال إنه ليمنعني أن أحدثكم حديثا كثيرا أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. He says the only thing that prevents me from narrating a lot of a hadith to you is the saying of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم من تعمد علي كذبا فليتبوأ مقعده من النار, that whoever intentionally lies upon me then let him take a seat on the hellfire. And he was afraid that with too many narrations that he might make a mistake, and a mistake would go back and be a lie on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. وحدثنا محمد بن عبيد الغبري قال حدثنا أبو عوانة عن أبي حصين عن أبي صالح عن أبي هريرة قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من كذب علي متعمدا فليتبوأ مقعده من النار, that whoever lies on me intentionally then let him take a seat in the hellfire. قال وحدثنا محمد بن عبد الله بن النمير قال حدثنا أبي قال حدثنا سعيد بن عبيد قال حدثنا علي بن ربيع قال أتيت المسجد والمغيرة أمير الكوفة فقال للمغيرة سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول إن كذبا علي ليس ككذب على أحد فمن كذب علي متعمدا فليتبوأ مقعده من النار. So over here we have a narration of Mughira ibn Shu'bah when he was in the masjid. He was the Amir or the governor of Kufa at the time, and he says that lying upon me, and he's narrated on the Prophet ﷺ, he said lying upon me is not lying on anyone else. Whoever lies upon me then let him take a seat in the hellfire. And the next hadith is وحدثني علي بن حجر السعدي قال حدثنا علي بن مسهر قال أخبرنا محمد بن قيس الأسدي عن علي بن ربيع الأسدي أن المغيرة بن شعبة عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بمثله ولم يذكر إن كذبا عليه ليس ككذب على أحد. So over here he's saying, he mentions the same hadith. He mentions the same narrator. He says, but this first part that who lying upon me is not lying upon anyone else. Over here, what did he just do? Over here, what did he just do? So in the first hadith, he says that lying upon me is not lying upon not like lying upon anyone else. Whoever lies upon me intentionally, let him take his seat in the hellfire. The second one, he says that it's the same hadith on Mughira, but this first part about whoever lying upon me is not lying on others, he's saying that this is not mentioned in the first hadith. What did he just do? Or what is he giving ishara to? Or what is he indicating? Huh? He's indicating either tafarrud or there's some type of illah, or there's a mistake that's here. Meaning, an illah can either be that it's something on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or it's very possible that this statement is from who? It's from the Rawi, or it could be from Mughira, or it can be from min ahad rawat. It can actually be from one of the narrators. But this part, man kadhaba alayhi muta'ammadan falyatabawwa'u maq'adahu min an-nar, that whoever lies upon me intentionally, then let him take in the seat in the hellfire. This is something that is agreed upon for sure. And that is the end of this next chapter heading, which is Imam Nawawī, he titles it Bab fi tahdhir min kadhib ala Rasulullah, that the chapter concerning and warning an individual on lying on the Prophet ﷺ. And I think this chapter heading is very appropriate for all of the hadith that Imam Muslim has brought here. But we'll stop here. It's almost time for adhan. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi sahbihi wa sallam. We have time for a couple quick questions if anybody has any. Yeah, tafadhal ya Uthman. Yeah. Yeah. So basically, if what happens like with the mudallis, because the second narration he actually does tasrih bis sama'. In the first one he says an Shu'bah, in the other one he says haddathana Muhammad ibn Ja'far, haddathana Shu'bah. So he actually does tasrih, stating that okay, this is who the wasita was and this is who the person was, which is why it was okay for him to bring it here. Wallahu a'lam.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.